Dana moved from Boston to Las Vegas in the late 1990s, and after spending a few years as a boxing trainer, he started managing UFC fighters like Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell. The fighters weren't making much money with the UFC, and neither was Dana, but this led to a conversation that would change his life forever. Dana was negotiating a deal for one of his fighters with the UFC, so Dana sensed an opportunity and called his friends, Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta, who were co-founders of a Las Vegas casino business called Station Casinos. They talked through the details, spent a few months negotiating, and eventually purchased the UFC for $2 million in January 2001. Dana White was then named president of the company and received an equity stake. But still, from 2001 to 2004, things didn't exactly go as planned. The UFC was able to convince state commissions in New Jersey and Nevada to legalize the sport, and they had a few thousand people showing up at each event. But the company lost more than $44 million in just 3 years. And in 2004, Lorenzo Fertitta was tired of continuously writing checks and asked Dana White to see how much they could sell the UFC for. In late 2004, Dana White and the Fertittas invested $10 million to create a show called The Ultimate Fighter. It was a reality TV show about 16 fighters who were split into 2 teams and coached by UFC fighters. They lived together, trained together, and fought each other for a UFC contract. The Ultimate Fighter ended up being a huge success, and it's the main reason that the UFC still exists today. The UFC saw its annual revenue go from $14 million in 2004 to $180 million by 2006. This increase in revenue enabled them to start expanding, primarily through acquisition. Then, in 2011, the UFC signed a 7-year media rights deal with Fox Sports that was worth at least $100 million. The UFC also signed a 6-year, $70 million deal that made Reebok their official apparel partner. The UFC is an incredibly impressive business. Dana White and the Fertitta brothers acquired an asset that many people didn't think was valuable, and they nearly lost $50 million trying to build it. But less than 2 decades later, the company now does more than $1 billion in annual revenue. It's one of the fastest growing sports organizations globally, and each of them personally made hundreds of millions of dollars on the deal. So we'll see what happens from here, but I think the UFC is only going to get bigger.